Exciting times. This is the fourth video in our Warhammer reaction series. We're still on the Bricky set, and this time we're going to be reacting to what is the best Warhammer 40k faction army to start with. If you guys haven't checked out the first few videos that we did the Warhammer 40k every faction explained. The second video we did the every chaos faction explained, and then the third video we did the timeline video, which some of you guys said that might have been maybe the wrong way to do things, and some of you guys said that there's not really a wrong way to do things. So also stick around for the end of the video and we'll go through some of you guys' comments from the last video and get some of your thoughts and opinions. Don't forget to like the video. Please subscribe to the channel if you want to see some more Warhammer content. It really helps me out. It really helps the channel grow. Helps get the video out to more Warhammer fans so that they can come in and laugh and critique, but also live vicariously through my experience as I step into Warhammer for the first time. And here we go. What is the best Warhammer 40k faction / army to start with? A Bricky original.
I must say the support on my prior Warhammer video has been, to put it lightly, absolutely outstanding. I've not had a video perform that well in maybe 3 to 4 years, and it's also a breath of fresh air to be able to make a video on something on a whim, on Warhammer, a, while very popular game, not a game that I ever really made videos on, and to have it perform as well as it does. You know, YouTube and the YouTube world doesn't like change very much, so it is incredibly heartwarming. But with that, it also came with a question that was always being asked to me ever since making that video. Hey Bricky, what army should I play? So for this, my next major Warhammer video, I'm going to answer that question. I'm going to go over all the different kinds of armies just like we went with the main video, except instead of lore, we're going to be going through the different various ways of collecting the army, as in not only price-wise, but how many models you're going to need, how new or old the model scopes are, and we're going to be going over the play styles of each army respectively. Are they melee? Are they shooting? Are they a little bit of both? Elite armies with only 20 models on the battlefield, or horde armies with 120 models on the battlefield? We're going to be discussing all of those, what each army is about, and give you at least a decent run through of every single faction to allow you to make the conscious and intelligent choice on which army you want to play if you want to get into the tabletop.
So I keep saying orcs because they seem to resonate with me a little bit, but I am going to try and keep an open mind and really take in the information and see if I can make an objective decision on what I would do if I decided to play
of Warhammer 40,000. But first, before we start, I need to show you something. So I own an absolute boatload of wall art all across my house I've received from cons, and so when I was contacted by Displate to sponsor this video, it was like an immediate yes. Now it come to my surprise that after I ordered 3 separate Displates to go along with the sponsorship, I immediately received 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 extra ones and then change. And I kind of start realizing why they wanted a Warhammer video so much. Orcs, 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 orcs. Gotta have orcs. Sisters of Battle, we'll be talking plenty about them today. Oh, yeah, Angels of Death in all their glory. More Angels of Death in all their glory. And a Drukhari, I don't know what this is. Is it an Archon? It might be an Archon. I don't play Drukhari, but obviously Dark Eldar. I know the spikes. I get the spikes. I love the fact that you can just slap it onto your wall with a magnet with no fuss, and especially for someone who was renting a place, and I know a lot of you have had those experiences with landlords where you try to hang up wall art, you put a nail into the wall, and they're like, oh, ooh, is that a 2mm hole I see right there?
This is coming right out of your security deposit, kiss.
So thank you very much, Displate, for sponsoring this video. I would highly recommend checking them out. They make absolutely fantastic stuff. So check them out, they're in the description, and let us continue with the video, starting off with a couple terminology we should learn before we actually get super deep into it. First things first, there's a thing called Forge World. Forge World is actually a lore thing with the Adeptus Mechanicus. However, what it is actually a partner to Games Workshop. Forge World makes these kind of custom minis that aren't in the codexes specifically. However, you can use them and field them in your games. They're just generally expensive, kind of a little bit weirder. They're a little bit more bizarre, and sometimes like fan-made creations.
So this is for the high-end game players. They're going to have the same abilities as the one that you would buy off the shelf, but they're going to be a little bit more unique looking. I guess it says they're custom. I wonder if you can actually put orders in to make ones that, well, I want them to have like a long gun or a short gun. I will say this, I thought this video was going to be about which faction to start with in the Warhammer video game. I didn't realize it was actually talking about the tabletop, but that's also rather fortunate because that was going to be one of the videos that I moved into anyway. Maybe watching somebody playing like a 2000 tabletop game or something and then trying to get some more information on which figurines that you would actually use. So rather fortuitously, this video came up, even though it's not what I thought it was going to be. It worked out.
And such, but Forge World is like a side company of Games Workshop that makes 40K. I might mention
$325. How big is that fucking thing? $325. I forgot where my camera was for a second there. I didn't. $325 for something to sit the size of this camera. Wow. You Warhammerers have got a lot of money.
Mentioned them a few times. I wanted to go ahead and tell you about that. They're not used a ton, but they are something that you can use. Next, I want to tell you about hitting numbers. So if I ever say something like, oh, this army hits on 3s or 4s or 5s, what I'm saying is if they hit on 3s, that means if you roll a d6 and you throw it out there, if you get a 3, 4, 5, or 6, anything 3 or higher, then you hit your shot. You've landed onto your target. If I say they hit on 4s, it's 4 and up, 5s, 5 and up, etc. And finally, we have things called stratagems. I'm going to mention those a few times. Stratagems are like special abilities you can use after having a pool of command points that you get for building your army, and you can kind of dole those out, these special abilities, stratagems, as you wish. You ever played Command and Conquer, Red Alert 3, or perhaps Kane's Wrath? My personal favorite was always Kane's Wrath. You know those little abilities on the side of the map? It's like those. Let's start off with the #1 best army you should collect for a new player. Space Marines. Before we get into tactics, before we get into how they...
I mean, that kind of makes sense. The fact that they made the video game all about the Space Marines, I'm not saying that like they're the simplest, but in my opinion, they're probably the most entry-level friendly or new player friendly. I think he just said that, but even to somebody like me, that makes sense. I mean, they didn't make the video game about Craft World Eldar or whatever they are, the Wood Elves.
Play, I want to remind you all of the most important rule, the golden rule of collecting Warhammer. You will always have a better time with the army whose lore you like and design you prefer. Always buy the army you think are the coolest. If you like undead Egyptian space robots that have enslaved gods as weapons, buy the damn Necrons. I don't care if Necrons are S tier or F tier, buy the damn Necrons, okay? If you love Viking aesthetic and you love Space Marines, get the damn Space Wolves. I don't care if they're S tier or F tier, get the army that you love the lore and the design of first. Nothing sucks more than playing a meta army that some people might not even want to play you against because you're going super power gamer and having to paint and create an army that you don't like. Play the army you think is the coolest. Golden rule.
Got it.
Okay, Space Marines. So the poster boys of Warhammer are our first faction today, and I know when I said that the best army to collect, all the new players are like, oh god, not the Space Marines, the generic ones, and all the veterans are going to say, oh god, not more Space Marine players I got to deal with, and the tournament players are already ready to hire a hitman to kill me. But I'm sorry, I know, I agree, Space Marines are, whew, right now, but they really are the best army. If you are a new player, Space Marines are your best bet. They are the best army to collect if you are a new player, and let me tell you why. #1, Space Marines got all the lore. They got a monopoly on lore. They easily have the most fleshed out backgrounds of any of the characters or factions in Warhammer. Space Marines have the most books. Wow. Space Marines are a huge part of the Horus Heresy. Just Space Marines will always have the most, and they have the most depth to them. #2, Space Marines are very easy to paint, especially for new players. When you get Space Marines, you have a ton of variety of chapters, and they all have a ton variety of colors. And they're also pretty easy. Space Marines are also very large, or at least larger than normal, so their canvas size is much bigger. Smooth armor, much easier to paint, especially their vehicles. And the paint schemes are easy. Ultramarines, both.
Yeah, it's good for somebody like me, because I mean, I don't have the most creative, steady artistic hand. I've never been good. Even when I was a kid, I wasn't good at colouring and staying within the lines. So this would probably be good for me. So I guess their armour is not a lot of sort of intricate details, not a lot of thin spikes that you need to paint. And they wear helmets for the most part, so you probably don't have to get too much in on the facial details. Or so I would imagine anyway.
Blue, white scar, white, Imperial Fist, yellow, salamanders, green. It's extremely easy to paint Space Marines. And for a new player, I would highly recommend them for that specific part because the painting and building is a massive part of this hobby. Number 3, Marines are always getting new models. They are always getting equal attention from Games Workshop. Even if they have just been updated, they will get updated again and again and again. And the Harlequins and Dark Eldar players are crying in a corner, but we don't care about them because I got a new Primaris Lieutenant and he's got a skull shield. I don't know. They're always getting new models, and while it might be a little excessive at times, they will always be updated and your rules will always be changing, and therefore it keeps it very fresh if you're interested in playing them. Number 4, you have a vast amount of data sheets and units at your disposal. See, in a codex, you have a part after all the lore of it, after some of the keywords and art pieces and stuff, you have the data sheet section where it goes over all of your units and what they do and their stats and everything, their special rules and so on. And when you get to that spot, however many units an army has depends on, well, how many pages of data sheets is it. Take the Adeptus Custodes. They have a very small amount of units, and their standard codex of data sheets is only 11 pages long. Sisters of Battle, however, a little more medium force. They have 19 pages of data sheets. The Imperial Guard, they have a much, much larger amount of data sheets because they're such a large army. They have 39 pages of data sheets. Space Marines, 56.
Jesus.
56 pages of data sheets for different kinds of units. It's a little bloated at times because of the amount of characters and stuff, but still, they are all over the place. Their variety is endless, and it is being even more updated and added as time goes on.
Makes sense because they probably have more sort of unique factions or unique battalion types within that faction. And they probably have a lot of unique individuals as well, like named characters that are in there too. So guys that follow those unique characters maybe have different codex information to go with them.
Which brings me to number 5, and the most important of them all. Space Marines use every phase of the game. See, in Warhammer, there are phases in each turn.
Okay, he's going through.
We're just getting into 9th edition, so we're getting something called the command phase soon, which is fine. But then we have the movement phase, psychic phase, shooting phase, the charge, fight, and then morale phase. Now, the last 3 are kind of all packed into one, if I'm being perfectly honest, but the main thing is that a lot of armies might utilize some of these phases a lot more often than expected. Grey Knights are very big in the psychic phase because they're all psychers, and so they really have a lot there, while Tau don't have any psychers, and they won't even use that phase, but they've got really damn good shooting. However, they don't have any melee, so they're not going to be using the charge phase, whereas, say, Slanesh Demons will use the charge and psychic phase plenty, but they won't be doing any shooting of like any kind, pretty much. The Marines, they will use every single phase, and you can't get good at the game and get good at the phases unless you're able to use all of them. And that's where Space Marines really shine. You can play them however...
So if I was a betting man, I would say the Orcs are more like the initial sort of melee phases, and I think they were descendant from Psychers or something, so I bet they've got a big Psyker phase. Probably not so much on the shooting, although they do have guns, so but maybe it's weighted less towards that. That's just a guess.
Whatever you want in any kind of role. See, if you are running, let's say, an Iron Hands or Imperial Fist army, these are both shooting-based armies. But you can still have good melee, where if you wanted to play a more melee-based army like Space Wolves or Blood Angels, you'd still have good shooting units. You could still do plenty in the shooting phase. That's the most important part. Space Marines will use every single phase, and they are very, very good at it. So that is the main 5 reasons why you should be playing, or at least you should try collecting Space Marines. And I know I don't need more Space Marines in tournaments, but it is the best decision. It's good to paint,
on his
good to collect. They're always getting updated. They got tons of units. They use every phase, and you can tailor them however you'd like. Plus, and this is kind of down the line, but eventually after playing them enough, you might understand which army you'd want to collect second. If you start collecting a little bit of Space Marines, you start realizing, oh wow, I really think I'd prefer having more models on the table, or I wish I had tougher models. Then you can go for Tyranids or then Adeptus Custodians. It helps you figure out your second army a lot better. If you're a new player, you want to get interested in it, just do this. Go online, get yourself either, or check eBay, because there's tons of offhand Marine stuff on eBay. Get yourself a pack of intercessors or maybe a tactical squad. I'd say intercessors because
is that $15 for 3? Doesn't say how many are actually there. Wonder if the red helmet guys are like the guy that's got his helmet removed and he's got like a symbol on his knee there, so he's probably like a sergeant or some sort of commander.
They're more modern, they're newer and more meta, and they're bigger for better paint canvases. Put them together with some glue, get some paint on them, try them out, and try getting into the game that way. I think it'd be a pretty smart and a pretty solid idea to get someone new into the hobby, and Space Marines just really are one of the better choices right now. Okay, whew. Now that I'm done sucking as much Marine dick as your brain, let's move on to the rest of the armies. And my personal favorite army at the current moment, the Imperial Guard, or the Estimilitare, is fucking the Imperial Guard. The Imperial Guard are my main army. They are what is known as a gunline horde army. Whereas Orcs and Tyranids have a horde army that has shooting but it's more melee based, the Guard is going to be running 60 to 100 infantrymen, support walkers, artillery batteries, aircraft, drop troops, tanks, bigger tanks. The Guard is all about just blistering firepower. Now, however, the downside to this is that the Guard, while well-trained, are only 4-up well-trained. They hit on 4s, and they also do not have very good survivability. Guard stuff tends to be rather fragile. They very rarely have any special saves to keep them from taking any damage. Most of their stratagems aren't based around survivability, but in fact more firepower. Guard don't shoot amazing with their 4-up accuracy, but they make up for that with the sheer amounts of numbers of shots.
I hear a lot of talk about this Cadia place or thing, so that's something that I want to look into as well. Cadia, I wonder if it's like, it must be like a country or a planet or something like that, right?
I don't care if my tank hits on 4s when I've got 3 of them. If the Marines are like the pristine Swiss Army knife where they can do anything and they have a little tool for every situation, Guard are like a Swiss Army knife that's about 10 times as big and attached to a big wooden stick that you just beat the shit out of people with. Your units are squishy, they don't hit great, but you've got so many of them that you just take people out by drowning them in gunfire. As for collecting the Guard, it's a little bit of a mixed bag. Their models...
So you got 13 miniatures coming in a box as well as you get a tank involved as well? Or maybe you don't get a tank in there? Maybe that's just a picture. Wow, it doesn't have a price on it. That's kind of what I was looking for, to see like how much something like that costs. I can Google it, I get it. I'm an idiot.
Are a bit older than I'd like. I personally think that they could use a decent amount of updates. They do get updated plenty rules-wise, but since they've got so many different kinds of units and so many Forge World options, a lot of them are a bit old and are showing their age. As for collecting them in the money side, they're pretty expensive. You're going for a horde army, so you're gonna have tons of models on the playing field. That being said, I still do love them. I love their lore and their design. I love the large swaths of infantry, and I personally think they are pretty fun, if maybe not the greatest army as a main army. The Adeptus Mechanicus are the war cult of Mars. They are very weird, and I've been over how weird they are plenty before, but they are probably one of the wackiest armies in the game, maybe along with Genestealer Cults. The Adeptus Mechanicus have a lot of really weird back and forth styles when it comes to their gameplay. They're mainly a shooting army. I'd say they're about 75% shooting, 25% melee. However, they do have a couple dedicated melee units that can hurt pretty bad, but they're much lower on the tier list compared to the amount of gunfire they can bring. They hit pretty well. They generally hit on 3s, sometimes 4s, depending on if they're using mechs or their own current bionics. But they do definitely have some of the wackier stuff. The entire army has a 6-up invulnerability save, so occasionally you get some pretty clutch moments when you start taking damage and you roll a couple dice and you get a couple 6s and you can shrug off like full-on missiles and stuff. So that is pretty cool. Like, one of their base weapons is a really regular, kind of crappy carbine, but if you roll a 6 for it, it does double damage, which can actually be ludicrously powerful at times. Then you've got the weird robots, the Castellan robots, that they are these giant like World War I mech dudes that have a refractor field, so if they block off shots with their, well, you know, reflector and vulnerable save, it'll launch back damage towards the enemy, which can be kind of crazy. They're very strange. They definitely are quite strange. Much more shooting over melee, and definitely fun, and has some great looking characters. Belisarius Call might be one of the best models in the entire game. Super cool looking too. A bitch to paint though.
They're very sort of like cephalopod, insect, you know, isopod looking creatures, you know, like you can see like how they've got like sort of carapace type looking armor. They've got little tentacles coming out that look like, you know, tendrils or, well, tentacles. I don't know, I think they look very sort of insect looking.
A bitch to paint though, oh my god. And that does lead me to the collecting of the AdMech part itself. They're actually getting a lot more newer updates lately. They're actually one of the newest armies as well. They came out only a couple years ago. All their stuff is in plastic and it looks really damn good. I personally think that they have some of the best aesthetics in the entire game. The only problem is that painting them is going to be a real bitch. I would recommend trying to do some of the simpler stuff, like maybe the Dune Crawler, before you get into things like Call or a Tech Priest Dominus, because wow, is painting that going to be really damn hard. Cost-wise, they are getting a bunch of new units, which is great, but generally when you get new units, they're very expensive, and whenever new stuff comes out, it tends to be a bit expensive. The army isn't a horde, but it's also not an elite army, so they're probably in the mid-ground when it comes to price range. However, I would recommend them to people who like some kind of wacky antics and some weird abilities and weaponry, because AdMech has been getting better and better as time goes on, and they're pretty dang cool to collect. So mid-tier price, maybe a little bit more expensive, but their scopes look great and they're very new, and I would highly recommend them. Next up, you've got the Adeptus Sororitas, or also known as the Sisters of Battle, my second favorite army, though I will be honest, they are really coming up to overtaking the Imperial Guard. I love my Guard, I love my Cadians, I love my Tempestus Scions, but the Sisters of Battle, they're really cool. Not only from a lore perspective, they're just insanely religious, zealotous nuns. That already is just really dang cool. As for the tabletop, they're one of the closest range armies in the entire game that isn't a full-on melee army. They're a slow-moving, like advancing gunline army with some actually horrifying melee units and just some like ridiculous close range fire.
Wow, look at those
The Sisters are probably one of the top 3 hardest armies to play, I'd say. They've got some really weird antics as well, kind of like AdMech, maybe not quite as wacky. This army can be played in almost any way as well. You can do this a full gunline army or a full melee army, or 50-50. Everything is viable. They do require a lot of finesse and manipulation, because these are all low toughness sisters that do have good armor, but when you've got a low toughness like they do, and they're not necessarily the most powerful when it comes to the actual punching, they can actually be shot off pretty quickly. So you need to be really smart on how you maneuver them, because you've got a super short range, kind of squishy army at times. That can be a little bit challenging to get through. That being said, people are sleeping on the power of Sisters. Let me be the first one to say it. You are all sleeping on how strong this army is. This army, if played well by a smart person, will crush you. As for the actual collecting of the models, Sisters are the most recent.
It's probably not like a beginner-friendly one, because you would have to get used to how you maneuver around the tabletop and get into sort of line of sight from a defensive sort of standpoint, or maybe like from a more covert standpoint, so you're not picked off as soon as you get in range, right?
It's an army, at least as the time of making this video, who had a complete army overhaul. For a while, there were no plastic sister models whatsoever, but the entire army, besides I think one unit, got a full overhaul of models. Everything is brand spanking new, and they probably have the best looking models in the entire game, in my opinion. They look incredible. That crazy gothic, kind of Catholic nun look. I mean, come on, their tank is a pipe organ missile launcher. It's a pipe organ missile launcher. Sisters are one of the coolest looking armies in the entire game. They are a bit expensive though. That's the one downside, is that because this entire army is brand new, it is brand new with a brand new price tag. So I personally love them. They might soon become my favorite army. I can't quite tell yet. They look great. They're a little expensive to collect. They have lots of different kinds of abilities, both melee.
It's like the fifth or sixth time said expensive to collect, so I get that they're expensive. Might not be for me, but what I was going to say is I love the artwork in this whole thing. And the sisters, in my opinion, have got some of the best artwork. Like the pipe organ stuff is funny, but at the same time, it's a really cool concept and it's very well done. I think some of their armor's pretty cool as well.
And shooting, no psychic phase, but they do have some shenanigans to stop other people from using the psychic phase. They're pretty cool, but they are really hard to play and they take a lot of practice. So kind of up to you. I would say not a very good starting army, but they are pretty neat. All right, Grey Knights, I heard you like the psychic phase. If you like the psychic phase, this is the psychic phase for you. Grey Knights are Space Marines X2. They're super mega duper elite Space Marines that are all psychers. They're nuts. Grey Knights are insane. They are very, very elite. However, you have probably like maybe 40% fewer models than an average army will have. All of your dudes, however, are scary in their own right. They all hit very well on 3s minimum. They all have great armor. Since they're all psychers, they're really good at dealing with other psychers. They also have great shooting and very strong melee. All of your guys have extremely powerful melee weapons. The only downside to Grey Knights is that any anti-psycho shenanigans can really harm them, and you are running an elite army with very few models.
Aren't they more susceptible to demon damage as well because they are psychers? Like powerful on the psyker sense, but they're also vulnerable to influences from the warp, right? I think the other thing is as well, like that he mentioned, it's not about how much money you can spend and you can, well, I bought 50,000 of these, so I'm just going to pile them on the table. But you can't do that. I'm understanding there's a limit to how many of each faction are allowed on the tabletop at one time.
When you run very few models, that means every time you're rolling and you roll those ones, it hurts that much more. Grey Knights, though, they have this awesome kind of old school knight round table aesthetic with them all carrying things like halberds and falchions. They've got holy text and they carry books around and flags, but they do get to use every phase as well. Lots of psychic, and then they're shooting and a ton of melee as well. Mainly psychic and melee. In terms of buying them, they're not too bad actually. They're probably one of the cheaper armies as well, because when you're running an elite army, not as many models on the tabletop, so it's a lot easier to fill out your entire army by only purchasing many or fewer boxes than normal. As for their sculpts, I don't know exactly how new they are. I wouldn't call them very new. I call them like middle ground when it comes to how old they are. They're not super old, but they're not necessarily super new either. That being said, if they are, say, medium old or whatever, they do look great. I love the way the plastic models look. I think they look fantastic, and I would recommend trying them out if you like a psyker-heavy Space Marine thing. You play Space Marines and you're like, wow, I like the psychic phase. Grey Knights.
Upgrade your psyker
Infantry
to
is
Grey
for
Knights.
losers. It's big mech boy time. If I'm being honest though, the Imperial Knights, I wouldn't recommend them. I'm just going to come out and say it. I don't think Imperial Knights are a very good army for a new player. They are one of the cheapest armies you can buy because while each knight in its own right is very expensive, you only need 3 or 4 to fill out an entire game's worth. And compare that to a full army, they're actually not too bad, like price-wise. The problem with Knights is that, as cool as they are, they want to use the psyche phase. They have plenty of shooting, though, plenty of shooting, and they can have some really great melee. But when you're playing Imperial Knights, you're not really playing 40k. A great friend of mine said, if you're playing Imperial Knights, you're playing chess, but you have about 6 queens against a normal enemy chess player. If the enemy chess player is smart, they could easily beat your 6 queens. I'm sure it'll be pretty simple for them to use their full arsenal to beat you. But if the enemy chess player is a noob, for instance, then there's a good chance that they're not going to be able to win, and you'll just kind of noob stomp them. And that's what Knights are. Knights are generally noob stompers, or more like just a middle tier army. They're not good for new players because they don't really teach you the game, and it's not the way the game is really, I don't know how to say it, meant to be played, so to speak. I got nothing against Knight players. If you're a Knight player, it's totally fine. If you run a Knight Valiant, you have nothing but my respect, all right? Get that Knight Valiant, 2-up armor, 4-up invul, Traitor's Pyre. Oh, you can't have both. Just have Traitor's Pyre.
I don't know what that means.
The coolest weapon in the game. All right, but honestly, just for a new player, I would not recommend Knights. They are cool. They're great painting projects, however. If you just want to paint something, definitely pick up a Knight for that. They look great. You're not really playing 40k when you play Imperial Knights. You're playing a kind of a weird hybrid of it.
That would be something that would be cool to sit like on the shelf behind you as like a, you know, as like a streamer's backdrop or something like that, or in one of these videos, instead of just having like a plain grey background like I do, you know, having a shelf that's like intricately decorated with cool stuff like this. I think that's where that belongs.
If anything, get a normal army like say Imperial Guard or maybe some Space Marines, and then buy one big Knight and throw it into your army as an ally. That would be the way to do it, I'd say. I think they're better as a supplementary character as opposed to a main army or force. This is also the same for Chaos Knights as well. They do look really cool though. They do look really cool. Golden Boys, Golden Boys. Adeptus Custodians are the elite of the elite. This is probably one of the most elite armies you could possibly play.
Godfrey
These
from Elden
guys
Ring.
are nuts. They hit on 2s or higher in shooting and melee. They have triple the health of a normal Space Marine. They have a better armor save than a normal Space Marine. They all have invulnerable refractor fields around them, which most armies do not have. They're tougher than Marines. They get to reroll 1s in the shooting and melee phase when a certain captain is near them, which means they're hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s.
Wow.
You absolutely murder people in melee. You've got some okay shooting. Your shooting is hit or miss, but your melee is insane.
But I bet you they're only allowed maybe 4 or 5 on the table, and that's it.
And you use about 20 models. They are literally the definition of Chad Thundercock.
I just need to shut up.
Chad Thundercock, if that was a human being, it would be a custodian. Okay, the problem is that you only have 15, 20, 25 models in your entire army. It is absolutely crazy how powerful these guys are, but they do pay the price for it. That being said, when it comes to collecting them, they are one of the cheapest armies you can buy because they're so elite.
Very Roman centurion looking.
Purchase, you don't need as many models to have on the field, so buying custodians is much cheaper than your average army. It's an elite army, and also they're much easier to paint in my opinion because they're so big, because they're like 2 feet taller than a Space Marine.
Big and
lots
gold.
of a big canvas for your painting, and they're almost all gold. Gold isn't that hard to paint, I wouldn't say. So they're good for painting. They're not very expensive. I would say they're not bad at beginner army, if I'm being honest. They're pretty cool. They have a nice kind of power fantasy to them, but as an elite army, every one you roll, it's gonna really hurt. So that's something you should be worried about, or warned about at least. They are pretty neat though. I'm not gonna touch on the Assassins, Sisters of Silence, or Inquisition too much because they're not really an actual army. The Assassins are really damn cool
though.
There's 4 of them and you get to pick one to add to your army as you see fit. They all have different things they do and specialize in. A sniper, a horde clear, a kind of confusion specialist, and an anti-psyker character. Cool, their scopes are really nice, and since they're only single characters, not too expensive, but you really can't make an army out of them. They're more of a supplementary character. The Sisters of Silence just recently got an update to allow you to field them with custodians, which is awesome and super cool, and is actually kind of a big part of them because the Sisters of Silence are big anti-psyker, but they only have maybe 2 kits, 3 kits in their entire army, and that's about it. They're not really worth collecting in their own right unless you're already collecting custodians. And the Inquisition are a whole bunch of just little characters, basically. A whole bunch of named characters with cool abilities, which are neat, but not really something that I would try to get a whole bunch of. Look at all 3 of those things after you're already starting collecting another army, and you're like, hey, I kind of want an assassin. Throw an assassin in there. Unless you're playing custodians, then check out the Sisters of Silence, because the custodian's biggest weakness is psychic, and the sisters do a great job at cutting that down. All right, let's move on to Chaos. So we got the Chaos Demons to start off with. Chaos Demons follow one of 4 gods: Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle, or Slaanesh Big Titty. With Slaanesh Big Titty, you're going for melee and fast. You are all melee, you've got no shooting, you got good psychic spells, but you're running in there at Mach 5. Papa Nurgle is slow, but tanky as hell. Tzeentch, a little bit in between, but tons of psychic spells. Khorne, no psychic, Melee hits like a truck. Pretty much all of the Chaos Demon factions are glass cannons and very heavy into melee. You got some good Psychers for about 3 of the 4, because Khorne I don't think has any. So there is still plenty of variety in there, but what you're doing is you got a whole bunch of big...
So the Psychers for each of these Chaos factions are like individual little factions or actual individuals that have some lore to them. Like Slaanesh will have like a ton of melee, but then they have maybe one Psyker demon in there or something that maybe has 3 or 4 follower figurines that can do some Psyker damage, I'm guessing. You'll hear that a lot in these videos, I'm guessing.
Glass cannon demons that run up and...
Alright, hang on, we'll pause.
We're in training.
Alright, well... Dog was going nuts. Back to it.
Glass cannon demons that run up and just break your face. That's Chaos Demons in a nutshell. They all have their various traits. Lich is fast and hits a lot of times. Nurgle is tanky. Tzeentch is Psyker. Khorne hits really hard. Pretty simple in that sense. But overall, Chaos Demons, to collect them, they're not something you would really collect by themselves. You would ally them in with things like Chaos Space Marines, which we're going to be talking about in just a moment. But as an army in their own right, don't try to make a demon army, I wouldn't say. They don't teach you a ton of the game, and they're a little bit limited because you have to stick with one Chaos faction normally. If you want to ally in multiple things, you're probably going to need some Chaos Space Marines to go along with it. And with that, let's talk about that. Chaos Space Marines, you're kind of getting the butt end of Games Workshop. They don't really seem to like you, Chaos, that much. I don't know why. A lot of your models aren't very new, and a lot of them are expensive, and your rules aren't that great. Most of the time.
That surprises
exception of
me.
something that happened in 7th edition with Chaos Demons, apparently. I heard it was a very, very strong codex. Chaos Space Marines are very similar to regular Space Marines, but they're much more focused on melee combats. You still have shooting, and it depends on which faction you're going through as well. But while you do have your shooting units, it is generally more melee-based, I'd say. Demons in their own right, and Chaos in their own right, want to run in there and start breaking face. That's generally their MO. As for Chaos Space Marines, it depends on what legion you're joining, but overall there are a ton of different ways for you to go ahead and get about completing your objective. The Death Guard and the Thousand Sons, I believe, are the most fleshed out. They both have their own codexes. They both have their own special units, especially Death Guard. Death Guard is very recent, and both of them allow you to feel the Primarch, which might be one of the coolest parts about them. You can run Mortarion or Magnus the Red, both gigantic, beautiful models that are cool. Awesome showpieces to have. They get shot a lot, but they're once they get into combat, oh man, they cause problems. As stated before, 18. You should be building what you'd like, of course. What you enjoy is the most important part of it. But as for Chaos, it's really, you gotta like melee combat, and you gotta like different kinds of allying, probably. I'd say Demons aren't, not Demons, but Chaos in general, isn't a great faction to start off with as a new player, because you need to understand the intricacies of how to do army building and knowing what you're running a little bit more prevalently. And so I'd wait on doing anything Chaos related, at least until they get a solid update, or someone teaches you, or you get a little more into the hobby. With the exception of Death Guard. I think Death Guard is in a good place for a new player, because Death Guard is pretty cool. But besides that, they're a little tough. Okay, let's talk about some Xenos, starting off with the Space Elves, the Eldar. So the Eldar are definitely a more glass cannon-y kind of style group.
Goblins.
They are the first Xenos race we're talking about, and there are a couple of versions. There's also the Drukhari and the Harlequins. However, the Eldar, they are strike hard, strike fast, and get out of there immediately. So the thing about Eldar is what would happen is they would fly out of somewhere, immediately gun down with extremely high-powered weaponry, hitting on threes with some kind of BS stratagems, if I'm being honest, and then they can zip back into cover and really annoy you. Honestly, Eldar probably have some of the more powerful shenanigans when it comes to the game. They have lots of weird rules. Their stuff hits extremely hard, but of course, once you fire back at them, if you live, they will crumble under a slight breeze to an extent. If you play Eldar, you won't be making a bunch of friends, if I'm being honest. I'd say Eldar are top 3 most aggravating enemies to fight against. People don't like fighting Eldar a whole lot, myself included. I find them to be quite aggravating, but if you're that kind of person who likes zip in, zip out, and be all kind of trickery and sneaky, they're definitely the army for you. They're definitely more shooting and psychic based. That's the two main things. They've got some good melee, but mainly shooting and psychic based. As for collecting Craft World Eldar, I'd say that they got some good sculpts. Some of their models look pretty good. They got some nice plastic. A few of it's a little bit older, but you don't need a huge army. So when it comes to the money side of it, not too bad. I'd say the financials for it are pretty dang solid, and I wouldn't call them an expensive army to collect, at least not from my knowledge. The Dark Eldar, or the Drukhari, are like Eldar cranked up to 12. They're faster, they can hit harder at some points, and they have really good melee units. Their melee units can actually be really scary, but they are also doubly made of paper. They're also a lot harder to play. They're probably top 3 hardest armies to play, along with the Sisters of Battle. And that actually goes on to the Harlequins as well. Harlequins are an army that just don't collect Harlequins, if I'm being honest. They're not a great choice. They have barely any models, and they're really weird, and they have a lot of shenanigans if you want to pull them off. If you're a new player, I would not recommend Harlequins at all. Dark Eldar, and Harlequins, speedy, made of paper, hit like absolute trucks, and not too expensive, I wouldn't say. Drukhari, I think, is a little bit more expensive than the other two, but not too pricey because you don't field a ton of units in your armies. Moving on, we got Tyranids, bugs. Yeah, got bugs. You gotta love those bugs. So many bugs. The Tyranids obviously are a horde army. It should be very obvious. They are also a melee horde army. Whoa, I know, call the presses. You are mainly spending your time in the melee phase as well as some of the psychic phase. You got a lot of good psychers in the Tyranids army, funny enough. You've got some pretty evolved and advanced bugs. And your melee phase is as it seems. You have really gigantic gargantuan creatures that eat by the everything old ones alive, or something. Or you've got 40,000 little boys that eat everything alive. You do actually have some somewhat good shooting too with your Exocrine and your Hive Guard. You can put out some pretty decent shots. They are definitely the kind of army you run if you want big swaths of just these angry little running bug dudes that just swarm on your enemy. It's literally called the Tyranid Swarm.
I am seeing some similarities between the Tyranids and the Adeptus Mechanicus as far as like their armor goes. Like the Adeptus Mechanicus armor looks like it was based on Tyranid exoskeleton.
As for price-wise though, I'd say they're actually very, very expensive to collect. Their sculpts are, some are a little bit older,
probably hard
but
to
not
paint
all
as
of them.
well.
They're a little bit in between when it comes to the actual date release for their sculpts. I'd say they are a bit older, though they are expensive. They're expensive, and you're running a horde army, so that's definitely one of the top more expensive armies to collect because, come on, tons of bugs, tons of models, and older sculpts. Can be a little bit of a challenge. Genestealer Cults.
Dog's going nuts. Let's see if she wants to come up.
Benny, what are you doing? Come here. Benny, come. Come on. Come be on TV for all your fans.
Come
Come on, Benny. Come here. Oh my
God.
You're so big. Oh gosh. Right. Hey, saying hi this time? You gonna say hi? Say hi to everybody. They even tag you in the comments. What do you think? What is that? What is that, big girl? Where'd she go? Where'd she go? Penny, say hi. Do you like, Penny, do you like orcs? Yeah? Do you like Adeptus Custodes? No. What about Slanesh? No. What about Nurgle? What about Khorne? What about Zeech? No? None of them? Alright. You all done? You all done? You all done? Alright, let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Oh, big girl. Oh, there you go. Whew. Alright. Now that we have said hi to all you guys' favorite, we'll get back to it.
You want to play bugs, but you want to play human bugs with scrotum heads. Genestealer Cults are a very new addition. Very, very new. And they run in this almost as weird as AdMech style army. They're very fast, they hit really hard, and they like dip underground, they crawl from underground, they hit you with very powerful short-range weaponry and super strong melee attack, and then they kind of run away and they like zip, hit and run tactics. That's probably the best way to do it. Hit and run tactics, they come out of the ground, they spook you, they do a bunch of damage, they run away, they got some weird psychic spells here and there, they run these like makeshift Mad Max trucks and stuff. They definitely have a unique play style. They deploy strangely, they like to zip around the place kind of strangely, and they
kind of
definitely
Klingon
are
looking.
one of the more unique armies there are. Would I recommend collecting them? No. They kind of fulfill a niche, but they're not that like overarchingly special, I'd say. I don't know what the word is exactly, but they are a very specific play style for a very specific player. If you're running Tyranids, you might consider doing Genestealer Cults, but at that point, you already kind of know what you're doing, so I don't think I'd recommend this to a new player. Genestealer Cults and Tyranids both a little bit rough to recommend to a new person because they are very expensive, both of them. And while the models for Genestealer Cults are definitely a lot newer and that's much nicer, they need
expensive
practice.
scrotum heads.
They are definitely a harder army, and I would recommend waiting on those if you're a new player. Orcs. Orcs.
Here we go. I've sat patiently through all of those factions and all those armies, and I think I have kept an open mind. And I will admit, some of them are very cool, but this is what I've been waiting for. But I'm going to try and go in level-headed and not just be like, yeah, they're cool. Because if I get into this and I look at it and they're not, then I will be willing to change my mind.
Orcs, orcs, orcs. Now, orcs. I would say orcs are great if you like the Horde army and you like having RNG dictate your life. So orcs hit on 5s, as I mentioned in my last video. However, if you roll a 6, you get to make another attack with the weapon. Everything from the little pistol to the giant rocket launcher. You can have a rocket launcher that fires 3 times, and if you get lucky enough, you can have it fire 5 times. But the main thing that you're probably going to be jumping with orcs for is the giant green tide, because their melee ability is pretty humongous. They have very weird gunfire, they got their weird weapons and their strange rules, the daka rules to allow them to get all these extra shots, and they can even have some pretty dang good shooting with things like shock attack guns and daka jets and stuff. If orcs hit on 5s and shooting, they hit on like 3s in melee. Orcs love to beat the hell out of each other. So it's very obvious that once they get into melee, they'll just start pounding on you because they are really good at hitting stuff. In fact, I might be speaking a little bit too hyperbolically when I say RNG controls your life with orcs. Or RNG controls your shooting, but your melee is actually pretty dang good. They've got a special ability called Here We Go, which allows them to roll their charge dice, which is a very rare thing and extremely powerful buff. Getting into melee has never been easier if you're an orc. As for collecting orcs, expensive. Probably the most expensive Horde army there is. Probably more expensive than Tyranids or Guard or anything in between. They have scopes that are sometimes new.
That gets me right here. Like, you would expect orcs, you know, like they're based on British football hooligans, basic common man. You would expect them to be like cheap, especially if they're hordes. Ugh, that's disappointing. That is disappointing.
Sometimes very old. You can have cool new models like Gazgul Thraka, but then you got a whole bunch of really damn old orc models because orcs have been around forever. Their codex in their own right is pretty neat, and there's some pretty good models in there, but
that's
orcs
a sick-looking model.
They're showing their age, and you need a shitload of them. And they are very expensive for that reason. So they're expensive to collect, and you need a ton to collect a good-sized army. But playing them, if you like melee with some really fun shenanigans and a bit of RNG, I can see why someone would like orcs, because they're orcs. Come on, they're great. Let's talk Necrons. So the Necrons, if I had to pick a Xenos army,
sorry, before I go into that, the orcs, I think like he's saying, because they are not getting as much love these days, they're becoming more and more like a collector's item then. So that's probably why they're expensive, or they've continued to be expensive. The price hasn't dropped, because if you're all of a sudden not making more of something, or you're not putting as much resources into something, then that that item becomes more and more valuable. They're deliberately driving the value of orcs up to play on the emotions of guys like you and me. I'm telling you, Games Workshop, you're going to get it. You're going to get a strongly worded letter from somebody who knows nothing about Warhammer.
I played Necrons, honestly. Necrons, I mean, they're just so cool. Undead, Egyptian skeleton robots that carry enslaved gods into battle. How is that not the coolest thing ever? So Necrons are fittingly named all about necromancy, but not like the undead homina necromancy, but like necromancy through metal. So the way Necrons are is that they are kind of a slow moving, at least some of their units slow moving, gun line with some mixed in melee units. Not all their army is melee, but their melee units that they have are actually like really scary. But for a while, Necrons are kind of slow-moving Terminator-style guys. They just blast you away at a distance with some very powerful weaponry. They kind of have Space Marine stat lines, actually. They run about as many models as Space Marines. They got similar stat lines and similar weaponry. I say that they're actually quite similar to Space Marines in the terms of how they play. But they actually do have a lot of weird shenanigans that make Necrons their own. For instance, the main thing that you might want to pick Necrons for is their reanimation protocols. Special ability that, let's say you got 10 units of your base Necron unit, warriors, for instance. You got 10 Necron warriors, your basic troop choice. Your opponent kills like, let's say 7. Kills 7 of them, you got 3 of them left. Their turn ends, your turn starts. You then roll a dice for every dead model. So 7 models, 7 dice. And for every 5 or higher, you automatically get one of your models to just stand right back up. Your Necron just goes like Your vehicles regenerate health as time goes on. You have special abilities to maybe make your Necrons come back on a 4-up instead of a 5. You can reroll your 1s for it. It's all about getting your units to come back up and being like, if you're fighting Necrons, you better kill it. Because if you leave it wounded, it's going to repair itself, and that's not a very good thing. That's the idea of Necrons. They got good shooting, they got good melee, and honestly, now is a good time to be a Necron player. They are getting a massive update right now. This is right before 9th when this video is coming out, and they are getting huge new model ranges, a ton of just new units in general, massive updates, rule updates. Necrons are getting big additions, and I think it's going to be super great. Now is a good time to be a Necron player. The new stuff might be a little expensive to collect because it is new stuff. That being said, they're not an elite army, but I guess they can be played an elite army if they wanted to, but they don't have a few models, they don't have too many models, they're nice in between, and now is a damn good time for it. Last but not least, we have the Tau Empire.
So before we go into the United States or NATO here, I didn't think that I would go for the Necrons at all. Like, their lore didn't really appeal too much to me. The Egyptian thing and the battle with the old ones and the star gods, etc. But yeah, that's some pretty cool stuff. This is why I went into it with an open mind. Like, stuff that I just dismissed before I came into it, I'm actually starting to come around to. Alright, here we go. The Tau, the Golden Boys.
The Tau Empire is for people who want to gun their opponent down with the most sci-fi hardcore Gundam giant mech stuff you can think of. You want to have your entire enemy obliterated off the board through just the unrelenting volley of railgun shots and rail rifles and fusion blasters. You will look up and you will see
like a horde of Megatrons.
Giant homing missiles blot out the sky as it rains down on your army because the Tau player's got 40,000 missile pods on all of his characters. He's got flying drones to fire laser sights to mark them, to have better accuracy, to block shots, and your big battle suit will be rolling up and then a drone will come in and block a missile from it. The Tau are definitely more of an Eastern-inspired, definitely a Gundam kind of look to them. And they are just ludicrously powerful in shooting phase. And they also have tons of special abilities to stop your opponent from getting to you in the charge phase. The Tau has no melee. Their melee is straight garbage. When a Tau infantry start punching, it means they've lost. And you might think to yourself, wow, Bricky, this sounds great and aggravating. Yep, that's about right. The Tau get a lot of shit. Some of it warranted, some of it not so warranted. The models in their own right definitely don't fit very well with 40k. They're much more of a sci-fi Gundam style thing compared to a gothic, grimdark sci-fi fantasy. However, I do think they do look pretty cool in their own right. Cool. It's just kind of weird in this universe. But when you've got an entire army whose whole job is to blast you away from incredible ranges across the map, and every time you even try to retaliate, they either gun you down when you try to charge or they block your shots with drones. it can be pretty aggravating. That being said, there are really cool new ways to play Tau, like close range attacks with Cold Star battle suits in the Farside Enclaves, which, by the way, if you ever use a Cold Star battle suit, or a Cold Star commander, I suppose, or a Yavara, you have my respect. So you do have different options when it comes to Tau instead of just sit back and fire, but you definitely don't got much melee. You definitely don't got much melee. You suck at melee. But if you just want to gun people down and the only phase you care about is the shooting phase, you don't care about psyche, you don't care about melee, you just want to blast people, Tau is definitely for you. As it comes for collecting them, their scopes are pretty good. They're not entirely super new, but they do look great. They have a whole bunch of different kinds of mechs, big and...
They just look kind of bland to me, like all the white and sort of, you know, yeah, the Gundam Transformer-y looking, but they just look kind of bland, don't they?
Small, they got drones, big and small, they got infantry units and everything. They do look solid, high-tech, and their scopes do look nice. They're also, I'd say, not too expensive. You don't need a ton of them, and the battle suits themselves are expensive for each box, but you only need so many of them, because they are very expensive when it comes to the points cost in the game. So Tower on the middle level of the expensive tier. Whew, that was a lot of talking right there. Covers it though. That is every army in 40k for you trying to figure out which army you want to play. I will reiterate, Space Marines, they are the best. I know it kind of sucks for some of us, but trust me, they are the
Space
best.
Marines,
I would highly recommend if you're trying to get into it, get a box of Intercessors, check out the rules, paint them up maybe. 9th edition is coming very, very soon. It looks extremely promising, and I think now is probably the best time to be jumping into this hobby. I want more people to be a part of this community, to be a part of this fandom. I think it is exciting. I think it has a little something for everyone, and I don't want anyone at all to not feel welcomed, not on any basis, not on basis of age, sex, gender, race. I don't give a shit, okay? I don't care who you are. I want you to at least give it a shot and be a part of this group with me, because I would always love new people. And honestly, there's no reason why you shouldn't have a good time along with the rest of us. So yeah. Thank you so much for watching this video, everybody. It was a pleasure having you here. Check out Displate in the description, please. They are the wonderful sponsor for today's video, and they were actually quite wonderful to work with as well. And plus, with so much Warhammer stuff, I'm sure you can find something that you can definitely decorate your wall with for a decent price as well. All right, I don't know what video I'm gonna be making next. It might be a League One, but I might hop onto more 9th edition stuff when 9th edition comes out. Perhaps I'll even make a video on how to play it. But until then, thank you so much for watching. My name's been Bricky, and the Emperor protects. Bye-bye.
So yeah, I didn't like the Displate thing as much as I liked the Sweet Six Pack, and it was a more obvious transition to an ad than the last one was. The last one got me, like, slid right into it. I thought that was awesome. Let's switch it up a little bit and we will do some comments. We'll go over the comments from the last video, which was the timeline video. Now, there were a lot of comments on this video. Okay, let's go to last one, which is the timeline video. As you guys can see, I've got a bunch of videos on my YouTube channel. There it is. Let's go to look at some of the comments here. All right, we'll sort them by the newest ones first, and then we'll go to the end. So we have the oldest ones first that we'll go through. Okay, so let's use the Tao's goddess for an example. She used to not exist beyond their pseudo-religion philosophy of the greater good, but because so many have started to follow the pseudo-religion, she is being manifested, created in the warp. They are literally creating their own goddess, and she, as far as I'm aware, should be reflective of that greater good philosophy. Big E was just a perpetual, meaning he was immortal, almost impossible to kill, and after some time, if something actually managed to kill him, he'd just be reborn. But since he is half dead, physical body being kept alive by his soul in the warp, the Imperium perception of him is turning him into their god. What the Imperium thinks and believes about him due to the ecclesiarchy is turning the Emperor in the warp into their god. There is a joke that the Orcs are helping the Emperor live and stay powerful due to their weird powers, because it's power of belief and imagination. As Big E's soul is in the warp and he is becoming a god, he should now, presumably, have a realm in the warp. Just like how the Chaos Gods have their realms in the warp. Presumably because of this, Big E can pull the souls of his followers to his realm in the warp. The yin and yang in the warp and real space, yin and yang do not mean good or evil, it's just to show opposites. I don't think yin and yang are good and evil, but material and immaterial. So that makes more sense, because still the concept of opposites, I'm not seeing the opposite. It's not black and white. It's not red and green. It's not opposite. It's just sort of more of the same, but with a different influence. I like that better. It makes a little bit more sense to me. Material and immaterial, matter and antimatter, real space and warp space. That makes more sense to me. Eldar, their mom, scattered the Primarchs across the galaxy as infants because she knew how the Emperor would treat them. He's the good parent in hindsight, and that's saying something. Or he's the good parent in hindsight, and that's saying something. The infants all landed on different planets, though by random chance or pre-planned is up for debate. Fulgrim and Jagatai may have been switched around. They would all grow up on their world they landed on and became its ruler, all but one, that is. The Emperor found them as adults and reunited them with their legions, who he had pre-made for each Primarch. This is only a basic rundown of the events. Yes, finally part 3. Yes, I am very sorry for the delay. Everybody's busy, I get it, everybody's busy, but I really am trying to get more videos out, because I actually really enjoy it. It's not like a chore to me, like, oh, I have to get another video. I really enjoy doing this stuff. It's cool to learn. The Emperor is a perpetual, which is an immortal being. He's not the only perpetual, nor the only human perpetual. He was friends with a few. The mother of the Primarchs is one, and Vulcan, the Primarch of the Salamanders, is also one. When one dies, they are just reborn, but when they do is random. As far as we are aware, the Emperor is in no way related to the Eldar. Some theorize that he was created by a rogue old one before it was killed. The Emperor has been around, at least if I remember right, the Neolithic Age, was named Neo, and had killed his uncle for killing his father. Also, he was born in ancient Samaria. I know it starts with Sam, and I think it's near Anatolia, and it's basically all the information we have on him, besides he would come out of hiding once in a while to steer humanity in the path that he wanted. We believe he was Alexander the Great, maybe Jesus, and other important people in history. So he's made, in our real history, different appearances throughout time. So he would have been people like Jesus, Alexander the Great, maybe perhaps a king here or there. Maybe he was Mother Teresa. On the topic of how the Necrons shattered the Catan, the Necron tier, before they were tricked into turning into Necrons, were super technologically advanced, more technologically advanced than the old ones. They lost to the old ones the first time because the old ones were all super duper psychers, and they also invented the webway, but that's going off topic. The exact weapons the Necrons used to shatter the Catan are unknown, but to give you an idea of the sort of destructive power they have, I'll mention the Celestial Array. The Celestial Array is a larger planet-sized device that has a perfect map of the entire galaxy projected inside it. Every star, every planet, everything is updated in real time on this map. What makes the array extremely dangerous is that if a Necron were to go to the map and find a star and pinch that star on the map between their fingers, that real star in real space would go supernova. If used too frequently, it will destroy the entire galaxy, because the science behind it somehow ties it directly to reality itself, and destroying lots of stars too frequently will cause bad things to happen. It is by orders of magnitude the most destructive thing in existence in all Warhammer 40k, period. And they still have it, and it still works. So anyway, after the Catan were defeated, Zarek, the Silent King, had the Necrons' most destructive weaponry dismantled or destroyed. They were planning to go to sleep for 60 plus million years and didn't want their super tech to be found by some schmuck who would accidentally destroy the entire galaxy. So the Celestial Array, a device that can just project some magical fundamental force of nature across thousands of light years of space and destroy stars, was deemed not destructive enough to warrant being dismantled. With that in mind, all we can do is imagine what sort of super god killing weapons they used to have. The man the Emperor had sit on the throne while he dealt with Horus was Malcador the Sigillite. He sat on it till the Emperor's broken body was brought back to the throne by Rogel Dorn, and as soon as he got off, he turned to dust. This man was also a perpetual, just like the Emperor, and besides Magnus and the Emperor, was the strongest psyker of all humanity, and he turned to ash as soon as he was removed from the throne. That's why they can't just replace Big E, and why they need to feed him 1,000, I think it's actually 10,000 psychers now, psychers a day, because the throne is literally eating what's left of the Emperor's psychic energy, just like it did with Malcador. Malcador was also Big E's best friend. Think of the psychers like mutants from X-Men. They are a mutation of human DNA. The mutations are caused by the exposure to the warp. Not enough exposure for your head to explode, but the vast majority of the psychers are naturally born from random pregnant mothers across the million worlds. Similar to the mutants of X-Men, the Psychers are a sign that humanity is in the process of evolution. Humanity is evolving to become a psychic race like the Eldar. Fortunately, the witch hunts across the Imperium enslaved the Psychers for the Imperium. This lowers the likelihood of rogue Psychers getting possessed and or corrupted. There were 20 Primarchs that were created, but for reasons unknown in the lore, 2 of the Primarchs were erased from the Imperium's history. As for the gameplay side of things, the 2 unknown Primarchs were a way for players to create a custom Space Marine chapter or legion. The warp is a projection of every thought and emotion anything in the galaxy has had, conscious or unconscious, and the more one idea is spread in the real world, the more it is expressed in the warp in a sort of physical sense. The old ones most likely created life on Earth, and it's very probable they killed the dinosaurs to terraform and bioengineer humans to be their third army. Dinosaurs lived for more than 200 million years until they didn't. I'm guessing that's 200 million. 200 million freaking years, and they conveniently just died around the time the War in Heaven was starting. The War in Heaven lasted 5 to 6 million years. It's not really a non-stop onslaught as it sounds, but more like an unending slow war between 2 galaxy-spanning civilizations. This war would have lasted several million years more probably. Maybe it would have still been in the process, but the old ones effed up and started experimenting with the warp too much, and they accidentally summoned a swarm of enslavers, primordial creatures from the warp that eat your body and soul and use them to open rifts to summon more enslavers. Yep, pretty awful. And because the Necrons do not have bodies or souls, they were mostly ignored by these enslavers. The rest you can assume. Please react to Bricky's every Space Marine Legion video. Okay, it's on the list. Okay, Penny. Big growl. We don't talk about the 2nd and 11th Primarch. Okay, duly noted. Can you react to Emperor of Mankind, Rise of Humanity? Is that Rise of Humanity? I'll look into that. Erebus by Major Kill awaits. I'm guessing that's another video. Other gods did exist at one point. The Eldar had a whole pantheon, but almost the entire pantheon was slaughtered except for 3 gods. Isha, a goddess of healing who is locked up in Nurgle's garden, Cain, who was shattered but still lives on, and the clown god, whose name I don't know how to spell. He managed to escape destruction. Now, what's left is the Chaos Friends, Gork and Mork, the Tau Abomination, which was a being created by humans believing in the greater good, and the Emperor, if you want to consider him one. Is that meant to be Chaos Fiends? Westhammer, Major Kill, Pancreas No Work, and Lutein 09 are the channels that go into more detail in 40k if you're interested. I am interested. No one really knows how and why humans start having more and more Psychers. They used to be like 1 in a billion kind of thing. Biggie is also trying hard to keep demons away from our solar system because of what the Primarch Magnus did. Biggie had a psychic shield around Earth, and Magnus broke into that because he wanted to warn Biggie via astral projection about Horus's betrayal, and unintentionally messed up Biggie's secret webway project. Oh, so he was trying to warn them about, hey, you're about to be betrayed, but in the process removed the big old shield and messed up human webway. Yes, doggo time. We need a separate HD penny cam. Hear that, Penny? They want you to have your own camera. You keep looking for good and evil in Warhammer, LOL. Good is just whose point of view you're looking at it from in this world. Yes, there are minor warp gods, not chaos affiliated. You're looking for something that's not really there. There is no real good in this universe. Good is either just innocence or devotion to their side. There's no counter pantheon to the chaos gods except for the Eldar gods, but they are not really active. There's a comment here that explains that. The Emperor is an anathema to the chaos gods, but more of a symbol of order rather than a force of good. Any opposition to the Emperor, even if it's for humanity's benefit, is heresy. Yeah, Bricky talks about the yin and the yang of this world. It's not so much a moral distinction as the fact that in the 40k universe that there's both a physical world and a psychical world, the warp. The one feeds off the other in terms of emotions that flow from it, also the souls, but that's never been clearly explained in my opinion. Also agree with Bricky in his previous factions video that it's also not adequately explained why what's produced in the warp in terms of chaos gods, other than the 40k verse, is a thematically pessimistic one. Beginning to see that. At 4721, there is a Warhammer tabletop game that is fantasy that is just called Warhammer or Warhammer Fantasy or the Old World. Warhammer 40,000 is a different reality and is far off in the future. I would add War Boss and Hell's Reach to a potential book list since you seem to dig orcs. War Boss is a fun, shorter story from the perspective of an orc, and Hell's Reach is about the Black Templars defending a planet from the largest orc invasion ever. Oh. I just saw that comment. I'm like, oh my god. Jeez Louise. Wow, that is a comment and a half. A sip of coffee for this one. Alright, let's do it. I'm ready. To explain why the chaos and the chaos... I guess I'm not ready. To explain why the Chaos Gods and chaos in general is so evil, it's because it's built on thought and emotion. The more prevalent and powerful an emotion is, the more presence it has in the warp. Over time, these emotions tend to pull together, and from there they develop into minor warp entities. Warhammer Fantasy explains this rather simply. Farmers seeing their milk spoil and curdle, not understanding the complex chemical and bacterial process involved, develop a superstition that there are evil spirits that cause this to happen. If this superstition catches on, either through word of mouth or because of similar thought processes among a given population, a minor warp entity will eventually come into existence based on the idea of spoiling milk. And that will eventually be its entire purpose, to make milk go bad. Its power will understandably be weak, so it's not actually responsible for all the milk going bad, but still exists, and its power can develop further. As society advances, they may figure out how to avoid spoilage or turn milk into cheese. They might explain this by doing something to ward away the evil spirit, or to help if the proper actions and rituals are taken. And so this minor warp entity goes from being a milk spoiling spirit to just a milk spirit. Or it might develop into a cheese spirit. Far enough down the line, the milk spirit is given a name, an identity, and a personality, and eventually it might be considered a minor god in that society, or a major god depending on how important milk is to them. This entity is what we would refer to as a demon, as it is a warp entity born of a specific concept and the thoughts and emotions attached to it, which grants it some degree of power over the real world based on how the collective consciousness of the universe perceives it. At first it may struggle to even put the idea that it exists at all into a single person's head, but in the end it may become a godlike entity with power over all dairy products if enough people believe it to be a real entity with tangible powers rather than an errant thought to explain some phenomenon. Now replace this extremely specific concept of spoiling milk with something similar and more primal like rage, hope, despair and desire. Now you have the foundation for something like the Chaos Gods, and the entities born from this can draw upon a more universal concept rather than a local superstition to become far more powerful and less defined. Put another way, there may have originally been countless versions of Khorne, Tzeentch, Nurgle and Slaanesh, but those four specifically managed to come to prominence somehow and become more or less synonymous with their parent concept. So Khorne in essence is the god of rage, warfare, murder and bloodshed, and there are countless aspects of Khorne which are either Khorne going by a different name or entities that have been absorbed by Khorne because they're too similar and not distinct enough to remain separate entities from him. This is actually how the Eldar god of war and murder, Cain, still persists. He is the Eldar god of war and murder, and there are enough Eldar around from the fall that still recognize him as a separate entity from Khorne, even though Khorne has claimed him as one of his. It also helps that Cain has physical manifestations of himself scattered through the galaxy to distance himself from Khorne. As for why chaos is so evil, despite supposedly having positive aspects to it, we'll take Khorne for example. He is the chaos god of rage, so everything that doesn't involve being pissed off and angry and acting on said anger is contrary to his nature, and the more angry and violent you become, the more you feed Khorne. Thus, he has incentive to encourage that behaviour no matter how extreme it becomes, because Khorne is the chaos god of rage, not the chaos god of rage followed by moments of lucidity. Likewise, Slaanesh is the god of desire, not the god of satisfaction. So any state of being where you aren't pursuing something you desire or actively experience it is antithetical to Slaanesh. So while laziness and sloth may be under Slaanesh's purview as something you can indulge in and enjoy, Slaanesh doesn't necessarily have purview over sleep and rest. So encourages more active pursuits of it if active only applies to the idea of actively experiencing something like how warm and comfy your bed is on the day when you don't want to get up and go out in the cold to go to work. So while laziness and sloth may be under Slaanesh's purview as something you can indulge in and enjoy, Slaanesh doesn't necessarily have purview over sleep and rest, and so encourages more active pursuits, even if active only applies to the idea of actively experiencing something like how warm and comfy your bed is on a day when you don't want to get up, go out in the cold and go to work. So Khorne may like things like martial honour and moral righteousness, but it's mainly because those who put stock in those things can get pissed off when they're violated. So it's also why Khorne doesn't like cheaters, liars, tricksters and backstabbers. They're something that someone who plays fair can hate and fixate that hatred on. Moreover, hate and anger tends to cloud logical thought processes. So being clever is also kind of anti-Khorne because you aren't angry enough to just be swinging blindly. This will all make more sense as you delve further into Warhammer and start to get a feel for how chaos operates and the internal logic it operates on. Like, how is Slaanesh the god of desire when Tzeentch is the god of hope? When Tzeentch is principally the god of change and hope is an earnest desire to change things for the better. So hoping for something and realizing it empowers Tzeentch, but the want of a better future and the satisfaction of achieving it is what empowers Slaanesh. So the two of them work well together, but they step on each other's toes a lot. In contrast, Nurgle doesn't want you to hope for a better future. He wants you to give in to despair, accept the status quo, and find some small measure of happiness. And Khorne? Okay, Penny. Khorne wants you to get pissed off that things aren't going your way and the maim kill burn for as long as possible, completely unconcerned for the outcome of how you feel afterwards. If you aren't angry, he doesn't care. Also, note how often I said the Chaos Gods want something. That is Slaanesh's territory, and all pleasure and satisfaction that other Chaos Gods and their followers experience or cause in others goes to Slaanesh. So you can understand why Khorne insists on only experiencing mindless rage. Tzeentch is only concerned about keeping things in motion, and Nurgle pushes people to feel like shit and just try to get by with what they already have. Slaanesh has its fingers in all the other Chaos Gods' pies, and they don't like it, Khorne especially. Holy comment, that was awesome. Great information. Sorry if I butchered some of the reading. We never regressed. Westerners just closed their eyes and covered their ears to the rest of the world. Just look at Asia. The three biggest countries hate each other, with the northern half of one being at war with the other half. We just got gaslit by public education into the world being literal rainbows and much acceptance, when it really isn't. The fact that we developed AI and progressed space travel meanwhile proves how cool we are. Also, the space progress wasn't made by rainbows and speeches of tolerance, it was made by capable men working on it. And women. There's no heaven. At best, the souls don't end up in the realm of chaos. So if you've lived a good life, you get to not go to chaos, is the reward. Alright, that is it for the extensive comments section. Thank you guys for all your comments. Amazing information, amazing feedback. Please don't hesitate to write follow-up comments if I've said something when I'm reading the comment, if you want to expand and elaborate on that, if I'm missing something, or if I've repeated something back to you that just isn't what you were trying to get over to me. Feel free to reach out. Information is in the description. Alright, that is going to do it for the day. Our next video is probably going to be our last Bricky one, which is going to be every Space Marine Legion, and then we'll look to expand on our Warhammer 40k lore and maybe take a deeper dive into some of the other videos that you guys suggested. Don't forget to like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. It's free and it helps boost me in the algorithm a little bit so I can get more 40k content and other content out to you guys as well. Thanks again for stopping by, and thanks for giving Penny, who's laying over there by the door, lots of love. I love having her being part of these videos as well, and you guys seem to enjoy it too. Who doesn't love dogs, you know? We'll see you guys next time.